Welcome to the Your Gifts Matter podcast. This podcast is all about guiding, educating, and inspiring individuals around the world to access their true gifts, talents, and abilities. We believe that everybody has a gift to offer to the world, and sometimes you may need help, inspiration, and motivation to bring it to life. And that's what this podcast is all about. Our guests are here to share their story, their journey, on how they brought their own gifts to the world, and show you how you can do the same for yourself. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Your Gifts Matter podcast. Excited to have Tim Scarrott with us today. He's a carpenter, teacher, and a husband who's exploring life's questions through lyrics and melody. Great to have you here, Tim.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And really awesome to have you here, Tim. I know I was able to hear a bit about you and your music on another group that we're part of, and so excited to have you here on the podcast here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
chat.
Yeah. So be great. I do this typically with all the guests. It's just kind of have a starting point of like where you came from, where you grew up, what that was like for you. So why don't we start there, and then we'll kind of dive into things.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in BC, mostly in the Salmon Arm area, and I've slowly been moving south down the Okanagan. I'm in Kelowna now. I would say that my childhood and my upbringing was kind of defined by, like, my family was very very involved in church. I would say, like, very religious and very, like, kind of set in their beliefs, and this is what we believe, and this is what we all believe. And so I definitely think a lot of my exploration has come from getting older and trying to figure out, like, what it is that I actually believe. So it was great in a lot of ways. I feel like my parents really taught us how to really care about people. They're very hospitable, and they're taught us a lot of great things that way. But I also just spent a lot of time not feeling like I was able to explore or ask questions. Always been, like, very, very curious about stuff, and it just wasn't really an option growing up. So I spent a lot of time just kind of towing the line and doing what I was supposed to do. And it took me quite a few years to realize that wasn't really working for me. And then just through some life stuff, like, we can get into later, whatever, but everything kind of fell apart, and I was forced to start exploring and trying to figure things out for myself. And I think I'm kind of getting to a point now where we're starting to put some pieces back together, and that's been kind of cool. So
yeah, what was that like as a teen and moving into adulthood around these, this way that life was supposed to be, that through the church that you were a part of with your parents?
Mm-hmm.
And like what was that like for you? Was there an internal struggle going on, or like how did you deal through that?
Yeah, well, I can now definitely recognize that there was an internal struggle. Growing up, I think I just did what I thought I was supposed to.
Right.
But I only am recently realizing how much kind of curiosity and exploration I had to suppress to be able to do that. I'm the oldest of four, so I also felt this responsibility to kind of be the leader in the home and kind of contribute to the culture of our family and trying to keep the peace and stuff like that. And I spent a lot of time just trying to make sure I didn't make any waves. And I didn't realize how much that cost me, like how much it cost me to just kind of be quiet and do what I was told. And I think that's the big struggle, is just having to suppress that curious, inquisitive side of me, because I was told what to do and I didn't really have any option other than that. So
yeah. And did that curious side of you show up at times, and then you had, like, what made you have to pull back? Was it you, or were your parents like, no, we can't do that? Or
yeah, like they're just, like, pretty, I guess they know what they believe, and they're pretty set in it. And
yeah,
it seemed like anytime we tried to stray outside of that, it was just like instantly shut down.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, like I don't even know if I realized how curious I am, how much I like to explore, because I spent so much time just like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what I'm supposed to do, and then wondering why, um, like life didn't feel like it was supposed to, like why I just like felt out of place, like I felt like I wasn't accomplishing anything, I felt like I couldn't make any progress.
Mm.
Um, and now realizing that I had to suppress this whole part of myself just to try and fit the mold. And um, yeah, and I think that's a lot of what songwriting has been, is that it's just
Mm.
like I can explore through music, and I can access these feelings that I can't access through talking or sharing or anything like that. Like, uh, but if I can write a song, all of a sudden these things come out that I didn't even realize are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wild, actually, how I'll write a song and I'll be like, how did I even come up with that? Like, I didn't even know that was in me, but it somehow came
Uh,
out. So, yeah.
and was music a big part of growing up for you
Yeah, my
as well?
family's pretty musical.
Yeah.
Most of my family are singers, and like I grew up playing in the bands at church, and
Hmm.
like it was always a big part of it. Like it's always been a part of me. It hasn't always been something that I've really pursued. And there have been long times when it's kind of gone dormant, but yeah, I would say it's always been in there. And it's probably part of what I had suppressed for a long time, just because it's so connected to my thoughts and my exploration and my curiosity, and
Mm.
and so it kind of got packaged in with all that when I had to just kind of put it aside for a lot of years. So
Yeah. And what was the turning point that really opened things up for you or made?
yeah, so I guess now is where we're going to get into it. So
Yeah.
in 2015, my wife and I had been trying to have kids for about 3 years, and we found out that it's basically medically impossible,
Mm.
for us to have children, and that is is a grief that we were not prepared to deal with. Um, I mean, your whole world changes. Like our whole future was planned on, okay, we got married, we're gonna have kids, we're gonna do the career thing, and all of a sudden that was just gone. And the other part was that, and it was really strange, but it was almost like the crisis we were going through didn't fit the list of crises that the church was ready to deal with.
Oh.
And so people just didn't know how to handle it, because people would either avoid us,
Mm.
or they would try to offer solutions, or they would, I mean, especially for my wife, like she received some really insensitive comments, and being at church became a place that was just not, like, it wasn't safe for her, and it wasn't a place we could grow. And so at that point, this whole performative life that I had built just collapsed, because it was based on something that at that point failed us. And so then we went through a lot of years of just trying to figure out, okay, well, if this didn't work for me, then what do I believe? And really, at that point, I was finally able to start sorting through, um, what do I believe, and what was I told, and what do I believe about God, and what is just tradition that I was forced into. Um, that was also part of the. I mean, there were a few things, but that was a part of the catalyst that, um, made my wife realize that she was ready for a little bit of a change. So she went back to university, and now 9 years later, she'll be graduating from medical school this spring. And
Amen. Yeah.
so it's like a total life change. And now that we're at this end, it was so necessary, but at the time, yeah, it was pretty brutal for quite a
Yeah.
few
Like
years,
it's,
actually.
yeah, it sounds like there's this dream of a family for yourselves, for you and your wife, plus
Right.
this whole community that you had surrounding you was just all of it was taken away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what did you like how did you get to that place of okay, I need to look at like you mentioned about looking at what you believe in. Like was that
Right.
immediate or was there a bit of a point there where it took you some time to figure out okay that
Well, I would say it took about 8 years, so it wasn't
yeah.
really
Yeah,
immediate, and I don't think I did it very productively at first.
right.
I mean, the first reaction is just kind of like, screw it all. Let's just all the things I wasn't allowed to do. Let's just try them and see what they're like. Um, and you realize pretty quick that like there's actually some substance to those like those principles, and like
Hmm.
why we don't just like go off and go, I don't know, like partying and stuff like that. Like it's not a fulfilling life.
Hmm.
But if you are always told not to do it and all of a sudden you just stop caring, well, that's just kind of that's the first thing you explore. So
Right.
wasn't very productive at first. Maybe it wasn't productive for quite a few years, but there was always just this, like, you start to notice the things that are constant and the things that are just kind of fall away. And so a lot of the rules and guidelines I grew up with, they just seemed very unimportant, but there was still this kind of constant presence that I would say, like, I would now recognize again as being like God's presence in my life. And it was like things just kept working out in my favor, or things would work out in ways that seemed too divinely inspired to be random. And it was just like there were these little clues everywhere, and over the years they start to accumulate enough that I'm like, okay, there, like, I do think there's something to this. um there's something to uh like having this relationship with God and having this source of power. uh I'm just still not totally convinced on like the church and Christianity
Mm.
part of it, and maybe
Right.
that will come back, maybe it won't, I don't know. But um the thing that has happened is that whatever I believe in right now, and it might be difficult for me to define, but whatever it is, it doesn't feel shaky anymore. Like, it doesn't feel like if you challenged me on what I believe that I would crumble under that
Mm.
anymore.
Right.
I would just be curious to have the conversation. Like,
Yeah, right.
I don't have to protect some tradition or some dogma, because all of that's already been destroyed, and the things that are remain are turning out to be like pretty true in my life. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You mentioned those clues that kind of showed up along the way. Is there any that jump
Yeah.
out at you that were like came out of nowhere, it seemed like, that maybe had a
Yeah. So
spiritual element to them, but
there so we had about a year ago, there was a big turning point for me. I Because I think for a lot of years, like, I was getting closer and closer and closer, but I needed something to shake me up again. And we had an incident about a year ago where one evening my wife was walking our dog around the block just around our house, and we had a little Pomeranian. And I will never claim that having a dog replaces having children,
mm,
but for us it kind of filled a little bit of that void, right?
right.
And so she was walking our dog around, and there was a one of our neighbors had two large pit bulls, and for some reason they were off leash, and our dog and my wife were attacked, and
Mm,
our dog was killed. My wife had to go to hospital. She was bitten and got stitches, and it was like the feeling of that feeling that I had when we found out we couldn't have children, like losing, even though it's not the same thing, losing this dog felt like it felt the same.
right. Wow.
And and like all those feelings came back, and we were forced to process them over again. Like, I think we kind of kept them locked up, And so it took something like that to bring them out again. And part of the difference this time was that our current community was incredibly supportive. Like it was amazing. But I still fell into a very similar low that I did when we originally found out we couldn't have kids. And so I was in a really low spot kind of last April, May, June. And there were a lot of things about that incident itself that were just weird. Like, there happened to be a police officer across the road who showed up on site before the incident was over, and they had an animal control officer with them witness it. And just even the fact, like, that was not a normal time that Kendra would walk the dog, and it just was like, not that I think that God like makes tragedies happen for us, but it just felt like there was something weird, and out of that it just felt like something was going to change. Something had to change. And it was shortly after that that I met my coach, Steven, who we kind of know each other through. And that was kind of weird too, because working with him over the last almost year has been very life-changing. And the way we met, like, we were going to the same gym, and we weren't really going there together for a very long time. It was just like our paths crossed just enough that we could connect, and I could be helped in that way. And
look at that. Yeah.
The timing of all of it is just wild. And so that's one example. But I feel like there were examples like that all throughout, that was like, here's an incident that it just feels too perfectly timed to be random, whether it was good or whether it was bad. And when you stack up enough of those, you start to notice and be like something feels like something's going on here. So, and yeah, I think the last year has been I guess probably 9 months has been the biggest year of growth. Like, I've probably grown more in the last 9 months than I have in the last 9 years.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden I think I was ready, and I was connected, and yeah, so it's been pretty cool.
It is amazing these moments in life that show up, right? And
Yeah.
and sometimes it takes looking back on them to see that there's these odd connections of things, or how we met this person, and how you talked about meeting Steven,
Yeah.
and the right people were in the area when your wife and dog were attacked. Like, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's interesting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's brought me back more than anything, is I just can't, it becomes hard to deny that there's some sort of presence or power out there that's doing more than just observing.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And when you talked about having to process those emotions again, like, what did you learn, and how did you do it differently as far as processing those emotions this other time around, like recently?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially not really.
Yeah.
It was pretty poor, but once I started to get some help, like, I can look back at my life and see that most of the major progress I've ever made has come with a coach.
Okay.
And once I started working with Steven, he got me just just looking at the stories that I tell myself and saying, okay, what about this is true? What about it's not true? What would you like this story to be? And we can start rewriting these stories so that we start to create a path that we're actually wanting to be on. And I think I spent a lot of time, even when I was involved in the church, like really digging into my past and digging up past pain and working through forgiveness and things like that. But I never really addressed the programming that came along with that. Like the mental programming that's like actually dictating how I live my life. I started doing that, and I would say that that's been the big difference, because the more you start to really observe like what it is you believe and what it is, like what stories and thoughts you're acting on, the more you start to realize that like a lot of this isn't true, and it's like it's not really leading me where I want to go.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize you can rewrite these stories, and you can start to head in a direction that is much more aligned with who you are and where you want to be and what you actually believe, instead of just this programming that you've lived with. It's yeah, it's been a wild journey over the last like
Yeah,
9 months, I think.
I can relate what
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah, because you just are told things are a certain way, or
Hmm.
life is this way, based on what we learn through family or friends and people we meet along the way, and then life happens. Big things happen in life, and it can open things up to have us question, like, hang on a second here,
Yeah.
like, is that actually true? But it can take a lot, like,
Yeah.
to get to that point. Not everybody does, right? And what do you think it was for you that enabled you to say, hey, I got to look at things completely differently? Like, what did it take within you to do that?
So I would say last spring, through all the, like, after finding out about not being able to have kids, and through all of that, like, I, no matter how bad things got, I still had this little thread of hope where I thought things would get better. And for the first time maybe in my life, last spring, that disappeared.
Mm.
I just reached this point of, not like, there was no hope, just nothingness. And I think that scared me, because it's the first time in my life that I was like, wow, things might actually not get better. And if they're not going to get better, what does that look like? And so it kind of takes like really hitting a bottom to realize that, like, this is not where I want to be headed. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that hope was that piece. Like, it, once that hope disappeared, all of a sudden I realized that whoa, this is serious.
Hmm.
I'm not just I'm not just sad anymore. I'm actually giving up. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. I know what we're gonna have you sing one of your songs here
Yeah.
towards the end of the interview, but I'd love to hear your journey with music and
Yeah.
how music is tied into this, because it seems like it's really been a big part of things. And as you mentioned, it sometimes went behind the scenes and didn't kind of
Yeah.
got shut off for a bit. But how has that helped you through your healing and getting you to this place that you're at now?
Yeah. So there's nothing that can quite break me open like writing a song that is a deep part of my soul that I didn't even know was there. Um, I wouldn't say this happens with most songs, but I've probably got 6 to 10 songs that, as I wrote them, I'm just breaking down and like bawling on my
They're
guitar. Like,
they're healing you in the process, it sounds like.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just reaches this depth that I can't reach through words or conversation. And typically it's not when I write the song. Typically it's 10 minutes later when I play it for my wife, and she just
Yeah.
has to watch me like bawl on my guitar while I'm trying to get myself together so I can finish
Yeah.
sharing it. But I don't know, there's something about mixing, like, music is so powerful. And when I can mix a melody and a chord progression that really feels deeply in my soul, and then put the lyrics that express what I'm feeling on top of it, it's um yeah, it's incredibly powerful for me. And then that makes me think at some point I should probably start sharing these with other people, because maybe they can help other people as well reach some of those same emotions. I know,
Yeah.
like, not everybody can just write songs, but it's it's something I've done for a long time. And yeah, it's kind of
Now,
it's
there's
time
something
to
to be said about that, right?
yeah.
It's teach the method that you're using. If it could be teachable, and it could actually help people
Yeah.
with healing in some aspects,
Yeah.
right? And is it always, has music always touched you in that way and been able to bring up emotions, or was it after you went through these big life challenges that the feelings really started to come out more?
Hmm. I would say growing up, it definitely did. Like it was a big part of my life. And then when we had our issues with infertility,
Hmm.
it died. Like
Mm.
my music, my songwriting went away. Like it just disappeared. And I would try and I would try and I just couldn't access. Like I had shut it off. Um, and it really reawoke. I guess it was summer of 2023. So I mentioned I met Steven at the gym. Like we would go to a
Yeah.
CrossFit gym together, and so I've been involved in fitness communities. So I have a friend who's an owner of that gym, and he ran a 120-mile trail run, so 200 kilometers
Wow.
uh, in 48 hours. And I was training for a race that summer as well, not that long. I did a 50K, but he asked me to pace him for part of it. So I paced him from about a kilometer 120 to 160. And he, the night before I was to meet up with him, we saw him on the trail and he was looking pretty strong. Another one of our friends kind of took him through the night. And then when they showed up, to the checkpoint where I was supposed to meet him, he was in rough shape. Like his
Mm.
feet were in rough shape and his spirits were down, and he was very close to not making the time cutoff. And so my responsibility was to basically, I like once we started running, I mean, I say running loosely, trail running is like real fast hiking, but I had to push him really hard through the night. And um, there were a lot of times where I didn't know if we were going to make it. I didn't know if we were going to make the time cutoff. I didn't know if what was going to happen. But no matter how hard I pushed him, he just kept going and going and going. And there was something about that just really changed something in me. Because when we got to the next checkpoint, where another friend of mine took him to the finish, um, we had actually made up some time, and he was in a position where he actually could finish. And when he made it to the finish line, just under the 48-hour cutoff, it was like I've just never seen I've never seen the grit and determination like that. And all of a sudden inside of me, I was like, if he can run this race and if he can look that rough at a kilometer 120 and still make it to kilometer 200, I can tackle some of these things in my life. And one of the first songs I wrote, again, was a song about that race, just about like I think the lyrics were, as long as one of us believes and we all take our turn to lean, we know this mountain can be beat, but only together.
Mm.
And
Wow.
um, it was life changing. Like all of a sudden, I believed I could do it, and my songwriting came back, and I started writing songs like crazy, and writing a lot more than I'm writing now. But it just got me,
Got you
back
going.
into it.
Yeah.
It woke something back up in me, and yeah, it was very powerful. Yeah.
And you were coaching him, it sounds like, and that coaching him brought up this
Yeah.
awareness for you because you were actually there to pace him, right? That's
Right.
powerful
Yeah.
that you were actually there to support him,
Yeah.
and then watching him as you're supporting him get to where make the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It was wild. So yeah, that was a big, big, big turnaround for me at that point too. And then, yeah, here we are.
Yeah. Well, why don't we hear one of your songs? It'd be great
Great.
to have the listeners
Yeah.
hear one of your songs.
So this song, I call it Calm Down. It's about, um, it's just about the thoughts that are in our heads, and how we deal with them and how we move forward with them, and how it sometimes feels like they're controlling us, but in the end, us overcoming them is often what leads us to some sort of freedom. So it's called Calm Down. So can we please just calm down? The danger is gone now, and I'd like to sleep. I'd like to take a time out, but you're in my mind and seem obliged to disagree. And the ghosts, they come and they go, but lately they've been holding on a little longer. Have grown a little stronger, I'm close to giving up hope. And no one would know, and I could just go back to the status quo, but that's what goes one more. So can we call a ceasefire? 'Cause everything's haywire, and I'd like to rest. 1,000 dark thoughts conspire, while nothing has transpired to warrant such unrest. And the ghosts, they come and they go, but lately they've been holding on a little longer. I've grown a little stronger, I'm close to giving up hope. And no one would know, and I could just go back to the status quo, but that's what goes one most. So if you break it down in all ways and analyze what still remains, though I am breaking down, I'm always finding strength in spite of pain. And I am breaking ground on pathways that lead to what fulfill me most, until I finally find that place. Well, it's just me and the ghost. And those ghosts, they come and they go, but lately they've been holding on a little longer. I've grown a little stronger, I'm close to giving up hope. And no one would know, and I could just go back to the status quo. Well, those ghosts, they come and they go, but lately they've been holding on a little longer. I've grown a little stronger, but hope is feeling quite close. And finally I know that there's no going back to the status quo, 'cause that's what goes one more. So can we please just calm down? The danger is gone now, and I'd like to sleep. I'm free to find my peace now. So if you don't mind, just hit the lights before you leave.
Amazing. I could
Thanks.
relate to some of the lyrics you were saying there as far as calming down and what's going on in my mind. So
Yeah,
yeah, really hit the mark on that. That's great.
thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final words that anybody that may be relating to what you've gone through in any aspect of your life, and anything that you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to say to any of our listeners that may help them in tapping into that curiosity and that passion inside of themselves and the gifts that they have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things. One is it's easy to spend a lot of time looking out to try to find what you're looking for, but for me anyway, I found that it's come from looking in. And the other thing is that I really do think that we need coaches. We need someone who can look into our lives and see the things that we can't. And when I look back at the progress I've made, the most significant pieces of progress have come from working with a coach. And it's hard to do, to trust someone like that, but we're just not able to see the things in ourselves that others can see. And Yeah, so that's been a big thing as well. So,
Yeah,
and
the
yeah,
answers are within, and the benefits of having a coach right beside you, which you benefit from a coach, and you've actually had a huge, from what you mentioned, a huge epiphany from coaching somebody yourself. Your
absolutely.
friend that
Yeah.
was doing the ultra marathon there. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 How can people find you and listen to more of your music, Tim?
Well, that's a good question. I'm really at the beginning of my journey with
All
this.
right.
I do have an Instagram, T Scarrott Music. I haven't been posting a lot on there, but I have lots of plans to start pursuing this stuff, but none of it has really started yet. I guess
Oh,
this is kind of the beginning. So once I have stuff, I'll start sending it out. But
sounds good. We'll
yeah,
share your Instagram in the show notes, and just great to have you on here at the beginning of the next part of your journey.
yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
This episode is brought to you by the Amazon best-selling book, Engage, Connect, Grow. 52 lessons to guide individuals, corporate teams to the heart of what truly matters to them. Are you at a point in your life where you're ready to commit to seeing your life challenges differently? Visit Amazon today and obtain your copy of Engage, Connect, Grow.